Dark skin is a costly liability in Germany. By Cringeworthy Germany. The fact that being of a dark complexion can be hazardous to one's safety and personal security in Germany is something that is not up for debate in my humble opinion. No matter how safe Germans claim their country is, whenever a native German speaks about conditions in their country, one must never forget that Germans by and large live in a matrix, like simulated reality program which is not remotely based in reality. And they are skillful liars as well and not to be trusted in general. Due to their programming, German perceptions are warped and uninformed on the whole. Their opinions and words are to be taken with a grain of salt, as the only thing Germans are constantly truthful about is the fact that they still believe that they are a master race. They may, or may not admit this outright in public settings because they are well aware that such statements are reproachable, but ultimately, their actions individually and as a nation speak louder than any words to such effect the Germans may or may not speak regarding their delusional superiority complex, which is not based on any tangible evidence. German superiority is pure mythology created by them for their own benefit. Such a superiority complex, as I have mentioned in previous blog posts, is based on deep-seated feelings of inadequacy and unworthiness, and as such is merely a psychological defense mechanism used by them in order to compensate or overcompensate for their glaring shortcomings, which are etched in the annals of history. Losers in 2 world wars, the sick man of Europe for decades, and continual beggar-thy-neighbor economic policies are just some of these glaring shortcomings that the world is aware of. What most people are not aware of, however, is the extent to which being a dark-skinned, visible other in Germany can be hazardous to one's health and physical and financial well-being. Being dark-skinned in Germany is literally like having an inviting target on your back and your forehead as far as Germans are concerned. I find that I am constantly targeted for abuse by German natives and am always expected to take it with a smile, as if such abuse represents some sort of natural order which I must accept. To the Germans, abuse of dark-skinned others comes to them naturally, but it's not something I have ever been able to take lying down. Because of this I am constantly fighting off trumped-up charges year after year and exhausting my financial resources in court fees and lawyer fees related to my defenses. Germans are cowards who receive sadistic delight in abusing the weak. Physically speaking, I am not weak. Mentally I am not weak either, however in Germany I am well aware that despite my physical and mental fortitude, politically and legally I do not exist. At the very least, I am positive that I have no rights in Germany which are bound to be respected, recognized or upheld at any level. In this respect, myself and others are extremely vulnerable when it comes to entanglements in their system. I say this as veteran of countless legal battles with the German state both federally and locally. I have never been convicted of any crime in Germany, but I have long stopped keeping track of the number of charges and cases I have had thrown at me. If I had to roughly guess, I have beaten around 20 different cases. Most of these cases were based on the fact that I had to defend myself from bodily injury or other sorts of abuse at the hands of some depraved Germans. I have the gnawing impression that Germans expect me to take their abuse lying down, given the fact that it's no secret that dark-skinned people have no rights which can be actually vindicated in Germany. The Germans know this as well as the dark-skinned population, and it's an open secret. Everyone just pretends otherwise and continues to live their lives without real cares or concerns in the matrix which is Germany. I discussed racial profiling in Germany in a previous article in more depth. It is not widely known that in Germany simply looking like a foreigner and having dark skin is recognized by the courts as sufficient probable cause to stop someone and make an arrest. To make matters worse, any further incriminating evidence that the police discover after making contact based on questionable probable cause can and will be used against you. What I love about the USA is that they have the rule of law in such cases, and if legal and lawful probable cause is not sufficiently established by the police, anything they find subsequently after making contact with suspects is not admissible in court. As a matter of law in America, if probable cause is not firmly established, the whole case gets thrown out. Not so in Germany, however, and a personal anecdote of a recent arrest is coming up later in this article. For more details on the complete lack of German political will to combat systemic police racism and government corruption, check out my recent blog post entitled, Breaking News, Study Halted into Racial Profiling by Police, a microcosmic representation of the larger macrocosmic issue of German denial and systemic corruption. With that being said, I've punched many punch-worthy Germans in their faces over the years and have paid hefty legal costs for the pleasure. I detest violence, however I won't hesitate to use it effectively to defend myself and my physical integrity against physical threats of violence both imminent and looming. And punching crass, disrespectful and racist Germans in the face just feels good whenever the opportunity arises. Germans will abuse you and start fights, and when you beat them up they will call the police and press charges against you as if they are victims. Germans are victims, all right, willing victims of their own delusional matrix reality. Being dark-skinned in Germany means constant harassment by any and everyone. I am under no illusions that due to my skin color, Germans from all walks of life, regardless of if they are rich or poor, feel that they have a license to abuse me. In many ways they do, as I have never successfully convicted a single German in dozens of cases of abuse perpetrated by them against me. My word just does not mean anything in Germany. Regardless of the fact that I am more educated, more traveled and more cultured than the vast majority, if not all of the Germans whose abuse I have been subjected to from all social strata, when it's a German's word against my own, the German always seems to prevail. Corruption and white supremacy at its worst, if you ask me. Everyone jumps on the abuse wagon and rides to their heart's content when that German wagon of mob abuse starts rolling. The Germans who don't jump on will silently watch in order to avoid the attention of the mob, lest the wrath of the mob be turned upon their own head. Germans in the mob won't hesitate to class other Germans who object to their mob tactics as traitors. The mob will even attempt to turn your own spouse against you if your spouse is German and happens to be with you while under attack. Don't be surprised when the German mob attacking you in front of your German spouse also encourages your own spouse to join in the abuse against you on the account of your spouse's Germanness. Germans must stick together after all in the view of the mob, regardless of whether it is your spouse or not. When these situations occur, they can be a moment of truth. In situations like these you can know whether your German significant other really loves you, or not. German female enablers, freaks and homos who appropriate the black struggle and dilute it. When gays, trans, so-called white women and other freaks in Germany and elsewhere try to use their struggle to piggyback off of the black civil rights movement and mix up this particular struggle with the agenda of women's rights and gay rights, it makes my stomach churn. I find it lazy, ignorant and disgusting and disingenuous. The black struggle against white supremacy is not the same as the gender discrimination or discrimination based on sexual orientation. So-called white women who complain of gender discrimination still have access to many other white privileges, as do the so-called white gay and trans freaks who are the face of that whole movement. So-called blacks on the other hand cannot blend in as other so-called white groups who allege gender discrimination, etc., and at the end of the day, we so-called blacks have to literally live in our skin and endure all of the abuse that comes with it on a daily basis. There is no hiding from it in Germany. Homos and freaks can blend in at will to the mainstream with a change of style or fashion. Women represent an integral part of the racist system because they are raising the Nazis of each generation and perpetuating the myth of German supremacy to the generations. How could a German woman's struggle be the same as the black struggle for justice and human rights? What do gays and trans have to do with the struggle against racism? Absolutely nothing. The whole purpose of mixing up all of these unrelated agendas with the struggle against white supremacy is to dilute the black struggle so that it loses potency with all of the freaks added into the mix. Now apparently according to the freaks, gay is the new black. Oh really? I was recently arrested for trivial crap, just because I am black. Earlier in this article, I briefly discussed the fact that German police essentially do not need to establish probable cause to control the populace. Simply looking suspicious or having skin that is too dark has been upheld by the German courts as sufficient probable cause to detain and arrest someone. The problem with this reality for people who look like me is that German police will often stop us based off of suspicion alone and build their case as they go along. These types of policing practices are abhorrent and they reek of Nazi, fascist dictatorship, which myself and others who look like me are constantly subjected to as a result of standard German policing practices. Obviously, such corrupt policing methods as the Germans employ are rife with unchecked human rights abuses, racism, and overall mean-spiritedness. These are the same Germans, mind you, who will try to paint police as your friend. The German police are no friends of mine. With friends like those, you don't need enemies. One of my areas of work requires that I encounter Germans from all walks of life and different social strata. While Germans can be very supportive of my work and often shower me with cold, hard cash, you can't please everyone. One of the many hats I wear is that of an artist. I can make a living exclusively from my art if I choose to do so, so I am relatively good at my art. But in Germany, all it takes is one person to take a disliking to you and what you are doing, and all sorts of problems can and will manifest. Germans love to call the police on others, especially foreigners. There is always an underlying, implicit belief among Germans that dark-skinned foreigners are always somehow up to no good, regardless of how above-board said foreigners may actually be. Like myself, for example, I am a hard-working father who is just here so I can maintain contact with my children, which is supposedly a simple, basic human right, but where their Germans are concerned, things always get complicated. I earn an honest living, and I am an introverted homebody when I'm not working. I am law-abiding for the most part. The fact that minor weed possession can still cause you to be arrested in Germany should come as startling to many reasonable people, considering the fact that prostitution is legal and operating brothels in residential neighbors with schools nearby is completely okay in Germany. But if you are allegedly possession of one joint that has less than 0.5 grams of weed in it, you will be subjected to arrest, especially if you lack the complexion for the connection. I mean to say that for any alleged offense in Germany, no matter how trivial, it's highly unlikely that dark-skinned foreigners will get cut any sort of break by the police. The German police are downright petty and malicious at the same time. So I got pinched for allegedly being in possession of a minute quantity of marijuana. The reason I got searched in the first place was for something trivial also and unrelated to the marijuana charge. And while I am reluctant to divulge specific details of my arrest, I can honestly say that I got flagged by the German Keystone cops for doing something completely legal and accepted. I was actually not even committing a crime, but just being dark-skinned in Germany is a punishable offense. So the police gladly detained as ultimately arrested me, since they were already operating with common racist thought processes and their belief that dark-skinned foreigners are always up to no good. In my case, my legal problems have been a self-fulfilling prophecy among the Germans, because they will make problems where there are none in order to fulfill their flawed perception that dark-skinned foreigners are criminals looking for trouble.